Okay, I guess we can probably get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire. I'm in Madison. I've been working at Zendesk for about 5 years now in our advocacy department and excited to be here with Damien.
Hey guys, Claire, great to be with you again. Like Claire said, my name is Damien Angona. I am the Regional Vice President for Latin American Caribbean at Zendesk, and super excited to be here and share a little bit about my experience and hopefully I can help others through their journey.
Awesome. So I guess maybe if you want to, I guess we can start by talking about how you first got into tech and into the tech industry. Because I know pivoting into tech from maybe not necessarily having a tech background or anything like that can be a really daunting kind of move. It can be really intimidating, really scary, getting involved into this industry. So would you want to first just kind of walk us through that path and that journey? Like, how did you first get into all of this and everything?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start my background. So I originally did start in tech or in tech sales. I graduated the University of San Francisco into what wasn't the best economic landscape, right? So I was at a job fair and I saw an opportunity to join a company that worked in the logistics industry, right? A company by name of C.H. Robinson. So they did third-party logistics, not very sexy or not as sexy as Zendesk is today, right? But that was a great start to my career, which that was a job in the Bay Area. It taught me a lot of, my first professional job, I would say, after helping out my dad and his construction company for years in my later teens and early 20s. But I always knew I really wanted to get into technology, right? So I said, I'm in Silicon Valley. There's got to be a way. From a personal story, and some of you guys may relate to this. I used to be this, long hair soccer player, surfer, at those times trying to get a job in sales, which was people facing, it was tough. So I took the leap and cut the hair and got a little bit more professional haircut and got my first job at a company that's been acquired now, but it was called Crowd Science, and it was a entry-level sales job. So pitching companies, this 15-person startup, and my job was literally just to get the first meeting for the sales guy to go close it, and that was an incredible experience. But yeah, it was a natural decision. I just knew I really wanted to get into it, and my message here is that there's a job for everybody, right? You don't necessarily have to be the most technical person. Today, I work in sales and go to market, so setting up the strategy. But I'm definitely not the engineer coding Zendesk. I'm grateful for those people, but that's not me. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you don't have to be the engineer to work in tech. There are jobs like sales, marketing, go-to-market operations, advocacy, and there's room for everybody. So I do encourage everybody to look at not only Zendesk, but other companies that have something that fits kind of your skill set or what you want to get into.
1,000%. Speaking as somebody who doesn't have a particularly technical background or a conventional background, working at Zendesk, there's definitely room and opportunity for anyone to join, just depending on what you're interested in. So I guess one thing that I know has been like a common theme throughout both of our careers and time at Zendesk, and even leading up to joining the company, is making connections and networking with people. So what are some of those ways that you're able to do that? Like, how did you put yourself out there and meet other people? Like, how did you find your way and navigate through all of this?
Yeah, so that's a great one. I think I'll tell kind of how I got started and then kind of how I do it now, right? So if somebody had told me how to do it now, I would definitely go back, right? But at the beginning, the beginning of LinkedIn, really. So it was not very common for you to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn they didn't know that wasn't near you, and that was tough, right? To making connections, especially as a first-time college grad. You don't have a parent or somebody that is able to guide you, like, hey, talk to my buddy who works here, right? And that's what a lot of our counterparts and different background do, right? So I didn't have the chance to lean on that. So the first thing I did was lean on the faculty at the University of San Francisco and just ask for guidance, really. And then the second part was, once I started making connections in the professional world through my first 2 jobs, was really how, I like this company, right? Like, research companies that you're interested in, and ask literally who knows somebody to get you there. In fact, a mutual friend that his brother had, his brother's company had just gotten acquired by Salesforce. And I really, really was interested in Salesforce, and that they were just starting the Latin American team at the time, and I really wanted to get that. That's how I ended up at Salesforce during that time, which then led me to a bigger network of people who I am still in touch with. Many of them ended up at Zendesk, and that's how I'm here today. But it's, if I were to give advice nowadays, not non-LinkedIn days, I would say definitely network on LinkedIn. I've already added about 20 people since yesterday, to be honest, and I am open to coaching, having conversations, whether we call it a virtual coffee or a happy hour. I think you got to look for people that are open to networking. I think we can all push each other forward. I almost wish I had somebody earlier in my career to do this. So I think the way I look at it is, be that person for others, right? So happy to do that, and I think LinkedIn is one, but literally ask your close ones and ask them for advice. One thing that I'll add on here, and I'm going kind of rambling on, but I think it's super important that I do it with my team, right? And it's who you ask for advice, right? And I took this course and I thought it was super useful, and I took it back to my team, and it's about, what does your personal board of directors look like, right? Like, what does that mean? And literally create a personal board of directors, right? That is, who are the people I trust with? It could be, job hunting, it could be love life, it could be, personal relationships, it could be whatever. But create that personal board of experience. And the shocking thing, and it happened to me, right, is that you look at your personal board of directors, and they all look like you. They're all the same age group as you. A lot of them could be the same sex as you, right? And you go, wow, I am asking people for advice that look and act the same way I do. So what advice are they going to give me? They give me that same exact advice that I'm looking for. More of a validation. If you're really looking to expand your horizons, that personal board of director has to be the most diverse it can be. So you get different perspectives, right? So you get different views on the role of professional life or on anything, right? I think I really encourage everybody to look at their personal board of directors, to really push them, I would say, outside their comfort zone to do that. So it's a little bit on a fun exercise. You guys can do it at your own time.
It is a really great thing to practice doing, is just reevaluate your network for that pretty often. And I think that's a great thing that you can kind of tie in with this particular event, since there's so much emphasis around like networking. So share those LinkedIn invites and everything on here. We're going to reconnect quick. What are some of the other things you've noticed? Like, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that the camera disconnected for a second, so I ran over and plugged it back in. An external camera, so apologies if I lost you for a second. I was able to hear you all the way.
Excellent. So what advice would you have for everyone to get noticed for a company for their roles, or like how would you want to make sure that your voice is heard throughout this? Because I think it's really important to create your own sort of personal brand and everything, and really like stick to your guns and everything like that. But like, how do you keep authentic and keep true to yourself in this kind of corporate environment?
Yeah, I think it's something that, a lot of Latino and Latinx, we all struggle with, right? And I've been there. I think an advice that I had earlier in my career was, obviously you got to do call it your 9-to-5 job or your 9-to-6 job, right? But then look for ways to take on more responsibility, right? That's one of the things that I looked for, is how to impact the company I was at, and every company, in an additional way. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're delivering on whatever our job requirements are for that particular job. But the way to really get noticed is to take on additional responsibility. I think my dad always said, and I still hold this dear to heart, is whenever there's an opportunity, just raise your hand. Even if you don't know how to do it, you'll figure it out, right? And that has taken me to Zendesk, right? I was hired at Zendesk as the first Spanish-speaking sales account executive. It also led me to open the office in Mexico City, lived there 2 years. It also led me to Miami, which is my I guess fourth stop if you count Argentina, San Francisco, Mexico City, and now Miami. So I've definitely taken on challenges and raised my hands whenever there was an opportunity that came up. I will say, you don't necessarily always have the skill set, right? Like you're not going to have the skill set, but if you're willing to take on and learn, and you have the people that are willing to give you that chance, I always say just go for it, and you'll learn on the job. As crazy as that sounds, I think it's one of the ways, or other ways, to get noticed that I have done in my career.
That's definitely can echo that same sentiment in a very, very different role, but that's a very similar thing. Is like, don't stress about not necessarily feeling like you're qualified, or if you don't seem to totally meet all of these like specific requirements, but think about those skill sets that you have, and already like your ability to think critically about situations, your ability to like really dive into something that's unknown and just have at it, like really, really dive into those scary areas and just have fun with it and try to learn as much as you can. I guess that kind of brings me to the next question. How, like, what would you say separates, it's like, speaking as a hiring manager, what would you say separates a good candidate from a great candidate, and somebody who's able to do those kinds of things?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. I think I always tie it back to the personal, right? So I've been an individual contributor. I've also been people leader, and then a regional leader, right? So I look at people who are willing, right, who have the skill set to live comfortably outside the comfort zone, right? It's not even just push yourself, but like literally do something that you've never done before, that you're willing to take on challenges, right? To me, that's a much more valuable employee than somebody who's got all the accolades for that role, that may not be so motivated, right, to learn new skills, right? I think Zendesk is an excellent place to foster your skills. I'm happy that I've been given the chance to grow with the company, as well as grow my skills, because I've had leaders that have done so. Our CFO, Elena Gomez, is a Latino X, right, and she's a global leader of finance for Zendesk, which is amazing. And she's kind of somebody to look up to, as well as us others in our region. But I think the important thing is that great candidates aren't necessarily the people that say, I complete all the requirements on the resume, but once you start talking to them, I think they have to be, one, a good team fit, two, a good culture fit, and they have to be willing to do more than what it says on paper, right? It doesn't necessarily mean more than the role, but they're willing to take on new challenges, because I think those are the people that are great additions to the team, right? They're the ones who are going to go out of their way to collaborate with their peers. We are in sales, but sales, by all means, is a team sport, right? Whenever we land a new client, there's a team of people, sometimes upwards of 20, who help land that new customer, right? So we really need that type of person, right? And I think it's it's really interesting to go through the different ranks and see it from a different perspective. But at the end of the day, I think for me, it's those particular things that I was mentioning.
What's other what's something that's really, really important that you'd say that you maybe learned really early in your career that still holds true today? Like something that you continually go back to and you're like, yes, that particular thing.
Yeah, so I think it feels unnatural, I will say, right? The taking on new challenges, right? Like a lot of us don't have the trait of like, I want to be uncomfortable in a social setting, right? Like it almost sounds crazy, right? But like just really pushing yourself to do that, whether that's, Toastmasters, which is public speaking, which I do a lot of, but at the beginning, to be honest, I sucked at it, right? And it wasn't something I enjoyed, but I got to learn to enjoy, right? And it's that constant, almost like, who wants to volunteer? It's like, just raise your hand and do it, because more good will come out of it than bad, whether, like I said, public speaking, whether that's, not an additional responsibility, but just doing something that's different, that's helping out the greater good. I think it's good. And then a more recent advice I got as I became a manager was to look at how you can influence the company that you're at. And I do this for Zendesk today, right? But like, not just your immediate role and your immediate impact, right? To the 10 people you manage or to the region you manage, right? I think companies such as Zendesk and other global leaders, they look at people, or people that stand out tend to be those that look at that problem that's happening, maybe right in the region, right in the problem, where you at least identify a problem, but you're able to tie it, hey, this potential solution that I have, or this potential 2 or 3 solutions, will not only fix my problem, but they'll fix a problem in Europe, a problem in APAC, right, which is Asia, and then North America, right? Some of the projects I've taken on, I say, hey, we have a problem here in our team here, but this solution that I'm proposing helps many regions across the world, right? And those are the types of leaders that stand out. I don't want to say it's a leader that's a Latinx or Latino that's going to stand out. Like, just be the best you can, but keep that in mind. How does your solution affect the greater good of the company? And that's literally, somebody told me, lead globally from your role, right? And at the time I was, first time manager, right? But I was able to quickly see, okay, this is not only going to help me, but it's going to help many others. And I just have to communicate it correctly, what the problem statement is, what the solution is, and how I think it can impact, right? Caveat there is, they're not always going to take your solution and do it, right? But it's great to raise your hand and have an opinion, because many of the higher ups will see, wow, this person has an opinion, they have a point of view, they think more strategically, and those are the people that we want to invest in and continue growing and polishing. So that was an advice from my VP and manager today, and I think a more recent one, but it still holds true, along with the earlier one of stepping outside your comfort zone.
That is low-key why I'm here, stepping outside of my comfort zone to try something new and really work on my public speaking. I think we can jump into some questions from people in the audience. Again, for anybody listening in on this, if you have a question that you want to have answered, feel free to pop it in the chat. We can try to go through them because we still have a little bit of time. This had sort of come up a little bit before, but how, from Domingo Moronta, in particular, how can you come across as authentic or reveal vulnerability when interviewing with BIPOC people that can have that used against them? Like, in a lot of, not necessarily, I think what you're trying to get at is, not all companies will see like BIPOC employees as being an asset to the company. They don't always recognize that there is power in diversity, and there's power in having badass Latinx people like in your staff.
Right.
So how do you practice coming across as authentic in those kinds of situations if you haven't totally been able to test the waters with that?
No, I think, Domingo, it's a great question. I think it starts out from the beginning, right, from the research perspective. So I encourage everyone to look at companies who have that DNA, right? Zendesk is a great example of one of them, but companies that are diverse, that encourage diversity, that promote diversity. It's not only a slogan. Like, I've lived it in my current company, my past company, where I'm like, wow, they really live it, right? It's not just a slogan that they stick on a website, right? So really make sure you're researching and interviewing in a company that you believe is a good fit. So that should take care of the awkwardness. And then once you're interviewing, just really be your true self, right? I think the way I hire, I don't look for people that look, act, and are the same way as I am. I look for diversity, not only in a background, but in a way of thinking. I am only as good as the people that report to me, and I want people that challenge me, as I do with my higher-ups, right? The challenge is good, the different perspective is good. It's what makes the organization as a whole better, right? And that's one of the things that I could advise. Make sure you be true to yourself, and make sure it's a right fit from the beginning.
One thing that I know we had just chatted about earlier today even is that, because you'd mentioned this before, like, it's one of the really great ways to get noticed and really get that recognition is to just volunteer, like, try new things, raise your hand when people are just like, hey, can somebody try this other thing? Even if you're not totally comfortable with it, just like try it and try diving right into it. How do you strike a balance with that, with taking on new responsibilities, but not like overexerting yourself or stretching yourself too thin with things, so that you can dive into these unknown areas, but really give it your all and give it all of your focus without feeling like overwhelmed by those kinds of challenges?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on a couple of good points. One of them is really like, we're not going to lie, there's a pandemic going on. Boundaries are really blurred right now. I am working from home. I have the kitchen right behind me, dogs working, and a couple of words of advice, right, to be able to concentrate on your work. One is establish boundaries, right? So I give you my personal experience. The thing I enjoy the most is my morning coffee. I'll go downstairs, take the dogs outside, come back in, make coffee for my wife and I. And we actually, this started during February, so during the pandemic, we started having coffee in bed, no cell phones, no computers. We're just gonna chat, have coffee, slowly wake up, right? And then there's time before our first meeting, maybe do a workout. But really just having that boundary of like, hey, I start work at 8, 9 o'clock, whatever it is you set your hour to, is really gonna help with your mental state, right? And the second piece of that is, we call them non-negotiables, right? But in any job you do, you should really know what your non-negotiables are, right? Things you're not willing to do or break, and just live true to that, right? However, most people do this and they fail to communicate it to their team, to their bosses, like, hey, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I'm not willing to do, this is why. It could be something such as, I'm not going to take an 8 p.m. call because I am the cook of the family and I have responsibilities and chores around the house. So really communicating that will one, help with your sanity, and two, really help you earn respect with your peers and your colleagues that you battle with every day to do good work. So I think it humanizes a little bit once you're able to communicate all those things.
That's great. We still have a little bit of time left. So again, if anybody else has questions, please post them in there, because we're all about that.
And I'll take one here, actually. I see it from Juan. He's asking me who's on my board of directors. So personal question, actually, I love it, so I'll take it. So I'll explain the exercise while we have a few minutes. The idea is that you look at your board of directors, but you don't do your significant other. You take out your parents, right? And then you start building your board of directors, right? It could be somebody you trust at work. They can't be direct family to you or your significant other, right? And what that'll force you to do, now, the first time I did the exercise, I was like, man, everybody, and I grew up in San Francisco, California, I went to school at USF. So my first time I did the board of directors was a bunch of guys in their 20s well, played soccer with me, who were foreign, you know, one Greek, one Turkish, one Italian, one Brazilian, right? But they're all, so if I'm asking them for career advice, they're just going to validate what I think, right? And what that'll force you to do, the idea of the exercise, that you start integrating or reaching out to people that you may not otherwise do to add them to your full of records. Not ungenuinely, right? Do it genuinely, right? But I think I've added like a person who really is a kind of a mentor, but she was a coach for PR for me at Zendesk, right? And she's been, her name is Dushka, and she's from Mexico, but she is this high energy lady. She's an author. She like had a PR firm, like super energetic, and most of us are intimidated to talk to her. And I reached out to her and said, hey, you know, I've heard you're helping other VPs and C-levels prepare for their engagements. At the time, I was a manager, and I think getting promoted to director. And I was like, I'm not at your level yet, but like, I love your help. And she totally reached out, like, Damien, like, love to help you. And we became good friends. Like, and you know, if I have to ask her for advice, she's on my board of directors. Such as maybe some of my wife's friends, right? When you're like, hey, that's a different perspective, right? Other people who are not in your industry. So just make it as wide as possible, and then you can go to different people for different advice, but just make sure you know that if you're asking for advice to people who look and are like you, then you're gonna get the same advice that you're looking for, right? And that's just an interesting thing about that exercise.
Gonna have to do that later. Question from Daniel Ortiz. How can I break into the managerial space as someone in a tech role?
That's great. So I can give you the perspective from sales, but I think it also applies, right? So one of the things, I think it's cultural, honestly, right? And Latinx, we don't, you know, we know what we want to do, we fail to communicate it, right? And that's like step 101. I feel like our counterparts do that, right, who aren't, say, Latinx or grew up here Caucasian. And all you got to do is literally have that conversation with whoever your manager is, or even two steps up, and say, hey, I may not be there yet. I want to do this role in a year, 2 years. I would love your advice. So it's not more of you're requesting the role, right? You're saying, I need you to point out what the lack of skill sets is for me to get there. So what can I work on in my current role that will perfect me to be able to get to that role, or whenever that position becomes available, that I can apply for it, right? So I think communication is key. Obviously, you have to have you know, that relationship with your managers. If you don't, I encourage you to start it. But I think it's key. Real life examples, entry level, and I you know, kind of just lost all shame. And I said, hey, I know I'm entry level, but in 3 years I want to be there. And I just communicated. And they kind of laughed it off. They're like, man, this person's ambitious, right? You should be doing that in every role, right? Don't have that shame to speak your mind and set your goals high, because there will be people inside your organization who are really going to promote you to get there.
That's great. Ariana Zamora just posted, and this actually relates to another thing we talked about before. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me personally. How do you keep from overcompensating as a BIPOC in order to move your career forward? I think a lot of times the imposter syndrome comes into effect as a person of color, and we feel we need to work harder to get those promotions and raises. But how do you find the line between getting out of your comfort zone to show your worth and doing more than you should for that reward or the promotion or raise?
I think I touched upon, I'll tie it in, right? So one is definitely, right, like my personal story is like, you know, my dad worked in construction and currently still does, right? So I remember during the summers, like, you know, being on the roof, putting up sheetrock, right, painting, and you really do start valuing what hard work is, right? I'm not saying we don't work hard in tech, but that's manual labor, labor intensive, you know, and doing a lot, right? So I think putting a value on your own work, I think you should turn that into an advantage versus a disadvantage, right? The advantage I see is when we're doing work, we're in the trenches with your peers, right? and somebody's complaining about doing too much work, you can always look back at a time. I'm sure everybody has a similar story, right, where they've seen their parents work hard, right? Don't look at it as a disadvantage. Take it as an advantage. You know what hard work is, right? And definitely do push, but then also you have to balance that with what we were talking about earlier, which is establish your non-negotiables, right? Which is what am I willing and not willing to do, and put it on paper if you have to, right? But also communicate that to your managers, to whoever your direct team is or your direct support team is. A lot of us have our non-negotiables, and we just have them here. And you got to communicate those. It's not a bad thing. You're just simply establishing boundaries. So whether it's boundaries, I'm not willing to take on, something that, I'm in sales and I'm going to do engineering, right? It's an extreme example, but an idea, right? Like establishing those non-negotiables, really telling others about it. And then I think it's a balancing act, right? I'm not saying it's easy, right? But I think you know what hard work is, turn it into an advantage, but also balance it with, hey, put boundaries in your work, establish your non-negotiables, and that should help you not feel like you have to do more work than others. But definitely, you do have to show others how, I would say, you impact the greater good of the company, not just your direct role. So a lot of it is communication skills even, right? Like how are you communicating what you're doing? It may seem like you're doing a lot of self-press at times, but it is, if you want to get noticed, you really do have to build those relationships and say, hey, this is what I'm doing for the company. And people will take it. It's not doing more work, it's just communicating it out to the people that matter.
It's definitely, that's definitely a really hard thing to kind of balance. And I know at least one thing that's been really helpful that an old team lead actually taught me to do is just write down your accomplishments sometimes, because a lot of times a lot of people tend to have a difficult time just recognizing like, yeah, I am really good at my job. Like there's a reason I'm in this role. There's a reason they hired me into this. Like it's not just some weird mistake. Like you're there for a reason and you're good at what you do. So like own it, like write it down, remind yourself, revisit that list.
That's 100% right. I think I have a little tab on Google. And I just, every single time you get a promotion, an accolade, whatever, write it down, because then when promotion cycle comes around, you're able to turn back. And that's a great one that I forgot, but I definitely, great advice for everybody out there.
That's fantastic. And I think we still have just a little bit more time. Did anybody else have any other questions that they want to toss in here? Otherwise, Damien, did you have any other final pieces of advice or things that you want to share with the group, or just anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll look here and see if there are any final questions that we may have missed, but I think, a couple things, right? Like, don't feel like you're an imposter. I not to undermine the term, but I think that's focus, right? We all belong. There's a place for us in every organization. It all comes back to us that you got to make sure you're looking at the right places, right? I think something that you wrote on there, if you don't feel like you're getting your worth, then definitely start looking for a different job, right? So I think it's all about finding the right fit and looking for companies that, really do encourage those type of diversity, right? And that promote it. So I think that's really important that you do so. All right. I don't know if you want to give any parting advice, Claire, but I think it's been an awesome conversation from my perspective. I want to thank everybody at Techqueria for putting on this awesome event. For those who may not see it, there is a army of people putting on this digital event across, I don't know how many cities, how many states, how many countries even. So super happy to be part of this event. We are hiring at Zendesk. Love to have conversations. If you're not looking to get hired at Zendesk, still would love to give you advice. I may be a little delayed as all you guys add me on LinkedIn, but I'll try to get to you as a lead by example and do so to kind of help everyone's career. I think we are stronger together, so that's kind of what we gotta make sure we keep each other honest.
For sure. Thank you, Damien, so much for speaking with all of us. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Thank you, Techqueria, for organizing all of this. It's amazing. I'm super duper excited to check out more of the other sessions. I hope everybody else is, and hope we'll get to chat more, if not in the other networking sessions, then over LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Awesome, guys. Well, looking forward to keeping in touch with everybody. Thank you so much.